China and of cheap contraception. Taxing the future, why China is forcing the birth rate issue and why it might backfire. The Chinese government's decision to impose a 13% value-added tax, VAT, on contraceptives and birth control medications, effective from early 2026, represents one of the most significant policy shifts in modern demographic history. Fundamentally, this change is not merely about generating state revenue. It is a powerful symbolic declaration that the government has officially ended its 3-decade-long support for birth control under the one-child policy. By transforming a former tax exemption into a financial burden, the state is shifting the cost onto those who wish to delay parenthood, attempting to coerce a behavioral shift in a society facing an alarming decline in birth rates. The primary driver behind this measure is a set of emergency-level statistics. China has faced consecutive years of population shrinkage alongside record-low birth rates. If this trend persists, the nation will transition into a fully aged society before its economy is robust enough to support it, a phenomenon known as getting old before getting rich. Consequently, the government has adopted a carrot-and-stick strategy. The carrots include tax exemptions for childcare, education, and matchmaking services, while the stick involves punitive costs on contraceptives to make the choice to remain single or childless increasingly expensive. However, deep analysis suggests this policy faces significant hurdles. China's low birth rate is not caused by cheap birth control, but by deep-seated structural issues, a staggering cost of living, world-ranking child-rearing expenses, intense workplace pressure, and economic uncertainty. A 13% tax hike may ultimately foster more resentment among the youth and low-income groups than it does an incentive to procreate. Furthermore, public health experts fear a backlash, including a rise in STDs and unintended pregnancies, which could eventually cost the state more in healthcare subsidies than it gains in tax revenue. The broad impact and social sentiment. For low-income and vulnerable groups such as students and migrant workers, this policy threatens to exacerbate social inequality. Those with the least financial stability are the most sensitive to price fluctuations. Making contraception harder to access does not change their lack of desire to have children. It merely increases their risk of unintended pregnancies or health crises, leading to even heavier financial burdens. Unlike the wealthy, who are largely unaffected by such marginal price increases, the poor may be driven to seek unsafe medical alternatives to save costs, damaging long-term quality of life. Compared to East Asian neighbors like Japan and South Korea, China is moving toward a more aggressive, semi-coercive approach. While Japan focuses on labor market reform and rural revitalization, and South Korea pours massive budgets into direct subsidies and migration incentives, neither has used a contraceptive tax as a primary tool. Thus, China's 2026 policy is a high-stakes test of whether fiscal pressure can overcome cost-of-living anxieties, or if it will simply widen the rift between the state and the younger generation. On social media platforms like Weibo and Xiaohongshu, the sentiment is one of biting sarcasm and outrage. The prevailing view is that the government is attempting to manage the bodies of its citizens rather than fixing the root causes. Trending phrases such as, "If I can't afford a condom, how can I afford a child?" highlight the logical gap in the policy. The surge of the #DINK Dual Income, No Kids movement with over 700 million views signals a collective ideological resistance. Many fear this is just the beginning of further state intrusion into personal privacy, leading to a deeper sense of mistrust and strengthening the Tangping, lying flat culture. The contraceptive tax, China's strategic gambit to rebuild its shrinking workforce. To understand why the world's second most populous nation is so desperate to boost birth rates, one must look past total numbers and focus on demographic structure. China is facing a rapid collapse of its working-age population, ages 15 to 64, the engine of its economy. This demographic has been shrinking since 2012 and is projected to drop by 20% by 2050. Simultaneously, the elderly population is skyrocketing, causing the dependency ratio to surge. This shift drives up labor costs, erodes manufacturing competitiveness, and places immense pressure on pension and healthcare budgets. The pension crisis is particularly acute. The Chinese Academy of Social Sciences estimates that the state pension fund could be depleted by 2035 without radical reform. With the worker-to-retiree ratio dropping toward critical levels, the government has already moved to raise the retirement age to 63 to 65. While industries are adapting through massive investments in automation and robotics, technology cannot fully replace the consumption base and innovation drive provided by a younger generation. The contraceptive tax is thus a desperate attempt to widen the base of the demographic pyramid to prevent long-term economic collapse. A global comparison: why India, Indonesia, and the US differ. While giants like India, Indonesia, and the US also face aging populations, their structural crises are less severe. India and Indonesia are still reaping a demographic dividend, with growing workforces and young median ages. India's median age is 29, compared to China's nearly 40. For them, aggressive birth-boosting measures are not yet a priority. The US, despite low birth rates, possesses a magnet that China lacks: a robust immigration system that consistently replenishes the workforce and supports social security. China remains a largely closed society. While the US grants nearly 1 million green cards annually, China has granted only a few thousand in the last decade. China's current talent attraction scheme, such as the K-visa for STEM experts, functions more as a borrowing mechanism than true integration. This creates a friction point, especially in Shanghai's tech startup hubs, where locals burdened by contraceptive taxes and high living costs see foreign experts receiving lavish state subsidies. This perceived inequality fuels the run culture, emigration among talented locals. Conclusion: China's 2026 contraceptive tax serves as a global lesson. Using one-dimensional economic levers to solve deep-rooted social and psychological issues often yields the opposite result. China's demographic crisis is a reflection of the tension between the state's desire for economic power and the individual's right to quality of life and privacy. Sustainable solutions lie not in making non-birth expensive, but in making living and building a family feel secure and meaningful. As long as the state chooses the stick over the creation of hope, it may face a demographic decline that no tax policy can reverse.